Lesson 15, Developing Federalism, Chapter 4, Section 3. States' Rightists versus Nationalists. Now, the states' rights position concerning how federalism should work favors state and local action in dealing with problems. The nationalist position favors national action in dealing with problems. As we go through these other slides, we're going to discover that these positions go back quite a way. We're going to learn why states' rights advocates believe what they believe, why nationalists believe what they believe, and we're also going to learn which parties favor which side. And in case you're wondering, states' rights advocates kind of focusing on the states being the force behind the Constitution, and nationalists focusing on the people being the force behind the Constitution. People who favor the states' rights position now tend to be Republicans. People who favor the nationalist position now tend to be Democrats. So here we see the states' rights position. They argue that the Constitution is a compact or agreement between the states, that therefore federal powers are limited by this compact. They argue this is a better idea anyway because the states are closer to the people, and they will focus in on discussing the 10th Amendment, which discusses the reserve powers, rather than focusing in on the Supreme Court decision in McCulloch versus Maryland, which focused in on the Supremacy Clause. The Taney Court, which a lot of the decisions in the Taney Court, I've heard people say Taney, but I had a professor who claimed he knew what he was talking about, calling Taney. The Taney Court was the court that basically set up some of the court decisions that led to the Civil War. And also the early 20th century Supreme Court leaned toward the states' rights position. The early 20th century court leaned this way until basically they were threatened by FDR with court packing. The nationalist position. This position argues that the Constitution is not a compact between the states so much as it is an agreement of the people. So they're going to emphasize the elastic clause as a way to carry out the will of the people, and they mean by that all of the people. They argue that the states only represent some of the people, the national government represents all of the people, and the Constitution is an agreement of all of these people. So they're going to focus in on the Supremacy Clause as explained in McCulloch versus Maryland. Now, over time, national governmental power has grown a great deal. There's been an expansion of federal power due to its ability to address crises. And these crisis points have popped up over time in our history. Examples would be the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II, World War I as well. And all of these have led to an expansion of federal power. I would also argue, your book doesn't go into this, that the Industrial Revolution and new technology that requires a great deal of cooperation among people to get working properly. I mean, think about it, power grids, air traffic, things like that, that's kind of expanded the power of the national government as well. Tools of expansion for this growing national government, tools that they use to exercise power, the war powers, commerce power, which is the power to control trade, and the power of taxation, taxing people. And we're going to look into those in these next few slides. War powers. This is pretty straightforward. The requirements of a mechanized military and our global military presence, we're sometimes called, world cops, has expanded the federal use of war powers, and it's quite involved now. We spend quite a bit of money on our military. And crises like the World Trade Center bombing has increased the power of the federal government. But here's the king of all of them, commerce power. Commerce today, well, when I say king of all of them, king of all of them in terms of constitutional law through the Supreme Court. Commerce power. Commerce today means nearly all activities of making, buying, selling, and transporting goods. So the commerce power is very broad applications. It was even used in the Civil Rights Movement with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The argument goes like this. People were discriminating from keeping African Americans from using their motels and their restaurants. And the federal government decided that was something they could pass a law against, forbidding that kind of discrimination at motels and restaurants, using the Commerce Clause. The reason being is that some of these people could be moving from state to state in order to do business. And business is commerce, and by making it difficult for them to find a place to stay and restaurants to eat at, this is going to inhibit travel, which is necessary for business, for trade, for commerce, and therefore they can pass a law preventing this kind of interference with commerce. The taxing power. The 16th Amendment allows the income tax. This was passed in 1913. I know there are people running around claiming to you that the income tax is not constitutional. It is. Now, the major source of money today is the income tax. It used to be customs duties. The money we made from charging ships that wanted to sell stuff in our country used to be the way that the federal government made most of its money. But now it's taxes, and it's really income tax that is the major source of money. How the federal government uses these taxes? Well, they use the taxes to discourage certain businesses or activities. The U.S. government also uses tax revenue, money they bring in through taxes, to persuade states to follow certain policies. How do they do this? Well, they give the states money to build highways, but in order for the states to take the money to build the highways, they have to agree to have a speed limit based on whatever the federal government feels is a good limit. So let's get into this federal aid to the states. There are two ways the national government can influence state and local policy. One way is this federal aid. It can give money in the form of grants, and later on we're going to learn about how all these grants work. There are different types of grants, but right now we just need to know that they can give money. They can also impose mandates that take away the state's power to make their own policies. So these mandates oftentimes don't come with any money, so they make these requirements like the Disability Act, which forced states to go through all their public buildings and build ramps for folks in wheelchairs and things like that. But there wasn't really any money to speak of attached to that act to help the states do that. And that's called an unfunded mandate. Preemption laws. Preemption is a power to assume responsibility for a state government function. So something the states were doing, and now the federal government's going to jump in and take over. An example would be the National Labeling and Education Act of 1990, which established national food label standards. So they have to tell you what the calories are, how much fat's in there, how much protein, vitamins, things like that. And of course the reason why the federal government can do this is because of the Commerce Clause. There's also restraint. This is a law in which the federal government requires that certain acts by state and local governments be prohibited. And we've already talked about mandates, which are orders requiring state and local governments to provide a service. And the example that I already brought up in the slide is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which required accommodations for handicapped people. Other examples include the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, which, basically pollution laws. They required the states to do certain things to keep the water clean, the air clean,